In recent years, the retro video game market has seen an unprecedented surge in prices, transforming what was once an affordable hobby into an expensive pursuit. Titles that could once be found for a few dollars in bargain bins are now commanding hundreds, even thousands of dollars on the secondhand market. Games like Pokémon Emerald and Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door have become especially valuable, with their prices skyrocketing over the past decade. But what is driving these increases in costs? Is it simply nostalgia, or are there larger economic and cultural forces at play? Today we will explore the many factors behind the growing expense of game collecting, including supply and demand, nostalgia-fueled purchasing, and the impact of modern gaming trends. Make sure to let me know down below what you think of these crazy retro gaming prices we're dealing with today. Now let's get into the video. The most basic explanation for the rising cost of retro games lies in the economic principle of supply and demand. Unlike modern digital games that can be infinitely replicated, physical copies of older titles are finite. Over time, these copies become rare due to a variety of factors, including natural deterioration, loss, damage, or simply being locked away in personal collections. As supplies dwindle, the remaining copies become increasingly valuable, particularly for sought-after games that were already scarce at release. For example, the Fire Emblem series saw limited print runs in its early Western releases, meaning fewer copies were ever in circulation to begin with. When demand for these games rose due to the franchise's growing popularity, their prices shot up accordingly. Same principle applies to many cult classic titles that initially had small production runs, but later gained widespread recognition, such as Shantae on the Game Boy Color or Rule of Rose on the PlayStation 2. Additionally, the demand for retro games is constantly increasing as more people enter the collector's market. Many who grew up with these games are now adults with disposable income, and they're eager to reclaim pieces of their childhoods. The rise of social media, YouTube collectors, and Twitch streamers showcasing their retro collections has only amplified this demand, introducing even more people to the hobby. Influencers like Metal Jesus Rocks and The Gaming Historian have popularized the idea of collecting rare and obscure titles, which in turn has led to increased competition for these games. This trend is particularly evident with franchises that continue to hold cultural relevance, such as The Legend of Zelda and Final Fantasy, whose older entries remain in high demand due to the ongoing popularity of the newer installments. Another contributing factor to rising prices is the growing trend of speculative buying. Some individuals and investment groups now treat retro games as assets, purchasing them with the expectation that their value will continue to appreciate over time. This artificially inflates the market, as people who have no intention of playing the games enter the scene purely for financial gain. These speculative purchases remove more copies from circulation, exacerbating scarcity and further driving up costs. This speculative investment was a key factor behind the record-breaking sales of graded games, such as a sealed copy of Super Mario 64, selling for over $1 million at auction, setting new pricing precedents for collectors. Speculative purchasing has led to price hikes even for relatively common games, as resellers stockpile copies in hopes of selling them at a premium in the future. One of the biggest drivers behind the rising prices of retro games is nostalgia. Many collectors today are adults who grew up in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. These were eras that saw the explosion of home consoles like the NES, Super Nintendo, PlayStation, and GameCube. Now that these individuals have disposable income, they want to relive their childhood memories by acquiring the games they once played, or in some cases, the ones they missed out on. This demand has caused prices to spike dramatically, particularly for games that are considered nostalgic classics, such as Pokémon, Mario Kart, and The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Limited edition versions of these games, such as The Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition for the GameCube, have become particularly valuable due to their exclusivity and nostalgic appeal. However, nostalgia-driven collecting isn't just limited to those who grew up with these games. Younger gamers, who may not have been around when these titles were originally released, are discovering them through online content, emulation, and word of mouth. The reputation of certain games as must-play classics has created new waves of interest in older titles, keeping their high demand. Titles like Earthbound, which was a commercial failure upon release, has since become a cult classic, with its price reflecting its legendary status. Nostalgia also plays into the psychology of collecting itself. Many people view retro games as tangible pieces of their past. linking them to cherished memories of childhood. The desire to physically own a part of that history leads collectors to seek out not just the games, but complete in-box versions with original packaging and manuals. The more complete and well-preserved a copy is, the higher its value. This has contributed to the rise in premium pricing for CIB or complete in-box games, as well as the increasing interest in sealed, untouched copies. For example, Chrono Trigger on the Super Nintendo, a game that was widely available in the 90s, can now sell for over $1,000 in pristine factory-sealed condition. Are you willing to pay these kind of prices for nostalgia? Game grading has become one of the most influential and controversial factors in the retro game collecting market. Companies like WATA and VGA have introduced a standardized way to evaluate a game's condition, assigning it a grade based on elements such as packaging integrity, manual and insert presence, and whether the game remains factory sealed. Once a game is graded, it is encapsulated in a tamper-proof case and can often be resold at significantly higher prices than an ungraded copy. This practice has led to record-breaking auction prices, with sealed and graded copies of games like Super Mario 64 and The Legend of Zelda selling for hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. The impact of game grading on the market is profound. A game that might be worth $50 in loose condition could see its price increase to thousands if it receives a high-grade seal of approval. Collectors who seek out pristine, high-grade copies for their collections contribute to this inflation, but the problem is exacerbated by investors and speculators who treat graded games as financial assets rather than entertainment collectibles. This speculative buying creates artificial scarcity as high-quality copies are hoarded rather than sold to those who actually want to play them, further driving up prices across the board. Another major issue surrounding game grading is market manipulation. There have been allegations that some grading companies have engaged in practices that artificially inflate game values, creating a speculative bubble that benefits a select group of investors. This manipulation skews the market, making it more difficult for average collectors to afford even moderately rare games. Additionally, the grading process itself introduces a new layer of exclusivity. Graded copies are no longer just games, they become commodities, valued more for their grading label than their actual gameplay experience. As a result, the divide between casual collectors and high-end investors continues to widen, making it harder for everyday gamers to participate in the retro collecting hobby. Despite its controversies, game grading is here to stay. It provides benefits such as authenticity verification, which helps prevent counterfeit copies from entering the market, and it offers long-term preservation for highly sought-after titles. However, its influence on pricing cannot be ignored. As more games become graded and auctioned at record-breaking values, the retro gaming market will likely continue to experience price inflation, reinforcing the growing divide between collectors who play for nostalgia and those who collect for profit. Not all games are created equal in terms of availability. Some titles were produced in large quantities and remain relatively affordable, while others were released in limited runs, making them inherently rarer. Games released late in a console's life cycle, such as Pokémon Emerald for the Game Boy Advance, or Xenoblade Chronicles for the Wii, tend to be more expensive because fewer copies were produced. If a game had poor sales or was in part of a niche genre, its scarcity today makes it a prime candidate for high resale value. Many games were never released outside of Japan, and collectors who want an original copy often have to import them, increasing demand and cost. For example, Mother 3, the sequel to Earthbound, was never officially released outside of Japan, making physical copies of the game particularly desirable for Western fans. Additionally, special edition versions of games such as the Metroid Prime Trilogy Collector's Edition for the Wii fetch high prices due to their exclusivity and limited production numbers. Another factor is the condition of the remaining copies. Over time, many games are lost, damaged, or thrown away, reducing the overall supply. Finding a well-preserved copy, especially one with its original box and inserts, becomes increasingly difficult. Because of this, games in pristine condition command significantly higher prices, with sealed copies being the ultimate prize for serious collectors. For example, Panzer Dragoon Saga for the Sega Saturn is another example of a game that had a small print run and is now one of the most expensive titles on the platform, with complete copies often selling for thousands of dollars. The rising cost of retro game collecting is driven by a combination of factors: shrinking supply, increasing demand, nostalgia-fueled purchasing, limited production runs, and the growing influence of game grading and speculative investment. While some collectors are willing to pay top dollar to own their favorite childhood games, others are being priced out of the hobby entirely. Whether prices will continue to rise or eventually stabilize remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: retro game collecting has evolved from a niche hobby into a high-stakes market, where the pursuit of nostalgia comes at an increasingly high price. Thank you to everyone for watching this video. As always, I appreciate it. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. I love you. Bye-bye.